I wrote the first draft. I remember coming over to do meetings in LA, and on the plane I actually saw Hurt Locker, and the airplane is not the ideal place to see a movie for the first time, especially a movie like that. But I was so into the movie; it was so intense. I sat there with my headphones pressing against my ears, and just I couldn't take my eyes off of the movie and him. And I just thought he would be perfect for Hansel. I didn't want to. I didn't want a clean action star because even though it's an action movie, I really wanted to sell the fact that these guys have a really dark past. And with Jeremy, he's kind of have that naturally. He's a great leading guy, and he can carry an action movie, but he also got this darkness to him. You kind of feel like it's that unpredictability that I love with him. Gretel's got to be badass, and she's got to match Hansel when it comes to action and brains, and it's really hard, I think, selling a. I don't know. I mean, it's the female action heroes are when they work, they're so. I mean, it's so rewarding when it works, and I really, when I wrote the script, I really tried to bring in elements of the female action hero that's always worked in movies, and try to incorporate them into Gretel. And I when I see movies, I get a crush on the female action hero if they're done right, and that was the goal with Gemma. You should and Gretel, she should kick ass just as well as Hansel, and it should look like she's loving, when she loved doing it, and Gemma did. Well, Jeremy, he said to me several times that he had so much fun doing this movie, and I think actors, when they do something completely different they haven't done before, they always love it, But again, he really responded, even though, yes, in an action adventure movie, again, he really responded to the character because of the darkness and the bond to his sister, and he and Gemma, have spent a lot of time. Because there's not many moments in the movie where they kind of have this brother and sister moments, but when they do, hopefully, you really feel that they're close and they really have this bond, and that was important for him and Gemma, really important for them. But I think he had a lot of fun doing the movie. That was a really important thing for us and for Jeremy, because he was on board very early. That when we're selling this brother and sister relationship, it's got to feel real and natural. It can't be. If that doesn't work, the movie doesn't work. If that bond, the brother-sister relationship doesn't work, the whole movie is kind of just another action movie. So it was really important to find somebody that they really connected to straight away, and they did. I don't think people realize how dark those original fairy tales were. I mean, it was pretty violent. And I remember for Hansel and Gretel, I had this cassette that I used to listen to with the whole fairy tale, and it was brutal. And I still remember to this day how when the fairy tale ends, when they shove the witch in the oven and they close the door, they have this horrible sounds of the witch is screaming and scratching the inside of the oven with her fingernails and just burning to death. And you listen to this when you're 5, 6 year old, it makes an impression. My previous movie was a Nazi zombie movie, and it was kind of a mix between everything I love with movies. You have horror and you have comedy and you have tons of gore. And I thought, in my head, it's always, if you can successfully match those elements into one movie instead of just going for one direction, it's always somehow a bigger experience, and a more fun experience. And so that was my goal with Hansel and Gretel, to take all these things that I love and try to incorporate in this action story. I knew it had to be an action movie, of course, but also spice it with horror elements and comedy elements, and that was the goal going in. It starts with the fairy tale, kind of our interpretation of the fairy tale. We felt it was important that we start with it, just because so many people have. I don't think there's ever made a really serious movie about it yet, so I thought it would be fun to show it, to actually do the fairy tale first, and just don't hold back in the fairy tale. Just actually take it a little bit further than you read in the book, So it ends with them burning the witch in the oven, and then we fade out and we meet them 15 to 20 years later, and they've grown up to be these successful bounty hunters that hunt witches, and they have they don't like to talk about their past. Obviously, it's a big trauma for them, but they still have this really strong bond in between them, and that's kind of what's driving them, and they're sticking together no matter what. they get this assignment to come to Augsburg to investigate a lot of missing children, and it turns out that they're kind of brought back to the place, where it all began, where it all started, and they kind of learn new things about their past, things that they, because of course they think that their parents left them in the forest to die, so they learn new information about this, and also they meet their biggest adversary yet, and they learn that they actually have been lured to Augsburg by this evil witch, and they're part of her big plan. In every witch hunt, Hansel and Gretel does, we always see them struggling because every witch is different, and every witch is hard to catch. So we really try to make them diverse, and everybody, we're doing a lot of work now in sound to, I wanted to incorporate a different animal into every witch, so they kind of have this animalistic approach within them. So we're kind of choosing animals, what we think fits for this witch and for that witch, and trying to make them unique. But we really want to reinvent witches as a villain, because I think, when you hear about witches in movies, you think about a woman with a big nose and a big hat stirring her pot, and we really want to make them something completely different. Even in the fairy tale, we established early that if you burn a witch, I mean, that's the safest way to kill a witch, and that's kind of what we realized through the movie. Yes, you can cut off her head and rip out her heart, like they said, but the best thing is burning her. Then she's dead, and fire is the thing that witches fear the most. So Muriel has come up with a plan of using a potion that will make witches immune to fire. So for the potion, they need a child born in every different month of the year, and also the heart of a white witch, and that will make the spell last forever. So, and all this has to be taken in during the blood moon that is approaching Augsburg. We had a great production designer, Stephen Scott, who did the Hellboy movies, which I saw, and I thought it was so rich and so imaginative that, he was the guy I wanted. And he's very old-fashioned. He draws everything by hand and color it by hand, and he's got a very imaginative mind. And that was again so much fun, coming up with the design of the classical candy house, or the town where they spend a lot of time in, or Muriel's caves. It's again trying to use these classical things that you might have seen in fairy tales before, and again add new elements and that we haven't seen before, and hopefully make it fresh. That's always a challenge, I guess, in any movie. We have this sequence where, in the beginning of the movie, where we see milk bottles with the missing children, posters on them, and we thought, it's fun. It's a fun way to making this classical world fresh in a way, but without you still buy it. Like it's a balance, and we hopefully we stayed within that balance. The transformations were, of course, CGI, but I don't think we've done any CGI work on any of the makeup. Again, I love good prosthetics. I mean, it's just, and we got Mike Alisade and Spectrum Motion to do that, which again worked on Hellboy, movies that I love and I love the look of. So again, him designing with him all these faces of the witches was a lot of fun, and trying to stay away from the classical big nose with warts and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we've done any CGI touch-up on any of the makeup of the movie, which is, of course, a great testament to those guys.
I had chats with Tommy. He was in America, and I was here in Germany, so it was very much a telephone conversations. But from that, I then developed some sketches and ideas, and we went from there. A lot of this movie is set in forests, cottages in forests, witches in forests, etc., etc. And the key was to find the right forests. We initially started looking within an easy radius of the studios, and then moved outwards and further out until we found the right look. The forests adjacent to Berlin are very much man-made and not particularly natural. So it was a question of looking for something which was appropriate to a medieval forest without man interference. They're all ambitious in their way, apart from scale. I try and put as much thought into all of the sets, be they small or big. They all matter. I'm always looking for interest in the sets, depth, alleyways running off where people can come in and out and generate a visual depth to it as well. This is a 3D movie, and it's important that you get as much foreground, background and far distance as possible. Well, Muriel's a pretty nasty sort of character. She's the queen of the witches, so to speak, the leader. So she's going to be a pretty nasty sort of person. And so she lives in a pretty nasty place, a very aggressive place, a very spiky, harsh environment. Underground, of course. Essentially, there was it all developed from much conversation about where these witches come from, and the wardrobe department, the costume department, worked very closely with the concept artists we brought in to evolve these characters. These weapons have been handmade for Hansel and Gretel, because after all they've got some pretty tough journeys ahead of them, and in the past too. So they need weapons that are going to do the job.
Edward is the giant troll in Hansel and Gretel, who is enslaved by the evil witch Muriel. He has a struggle because he secretly has a heart of gold and he wants to do the right thing by helping Gretel out, but he has to overcome his own fear of being punished from Muriel to do that. Trolls are born to serve witches, and he was born the kind that serves white witches, which are the good witches. And being that they're extinct, he has no purpose, no one to serve. He tells a story about coming across and meeting Muriel, and she could have killed him, but she doesn't. And so he is sworn to her, you know, that's his job now, is to serve her, and he lives in fear of, you know, being hurt by her. And so when he finds Gretel, he has a connection to her. He realizes that she is a white witch, which Gretel at the time doesn't know. And he's lived his life without a purpose, and that's his purpose. And he's conflicted because he has to overcome his fear. With the Edward character, it's pretty crazy. It's for myself as an actor, it's like I'm acting in a void, because my vision, I see out the character's mouth when it's open, but in the scenes, it's very rarely open. So you, as an actor, you almost have to take a mental picture or a photograph of what you see, and you have to remember where that is for your movement, because during the scene, I'm completely blind. And a lot of times you think you can use your sense of touch to feel what's going on, but my hands in the character stop about just below the wrist of Edward, and they're giant animatronic hands, and we have a guy from Spectral on each of the hands controlling them separately. So you lose a sense of touch. Tommy on set is a hoot. It's so wild because being that he's a newer director, and this is his first big Hollywood film, I've seen directors in the same position be under so much stress, trying to get their idea across, and there's so many different things going on, they become overwhelmed at what's happening. Tommy is so cool, calm, and collected. It's a little eerie. He's having fun with his friends is what he's doing. The most enjoyable thing about working on Hansel and Gretel are the people, the crew and the cast. Everyone, every now and then you work on a show where it feels special, where everyone's trying to row the boat in the same direction. We all want to accomplish the same goals, and just had such a good time with everyone. There's not like one person that pops in my head like, oh, that guy's a jerk. Just had a really, really good time. I think a lot of that comes from Tommy. Tommy set the pace for the feel of the show, that he's so kind and generous, and you want it to be a good show for him. So he leads out of love and not out of fear, and I like that very much. Gemma, for example, we're doing one scene over in Trollbrook, and it's cold, it's rainy, everyone is, huddled together for warmth. We do a reverse shot where it doesn't have to be Gemma. She can go to her trailer and stay warm, and it's my coverage for Edward. And she's like, no, I want to stay. And so she stayed, so we had the energy and the interaction between us, and she didn't have to. What I really enjoy about the film is that it's unique in a way that it's not just a strict fantasy genre film. Fantasy is a part of it. You have the comedy, you have horror, you have action, and it's all mixed together. Even the like that childlike wonder when we watched like Stand By Me or Goonies as a child, that action adventure of kids that ties into this film. And so it's such a huge demographic. You'll find something that you like in the film.
It seems to me that, you know, there are directors who embrace physical effects because they understand them, they know what they are and how they're supposed to work, and they also like the fact that the practical effect is a tactile presence on the set. You know, it helps the other actors to perform against this thing, and it's a presence. You know, it's a real entity that is standing right in front of the camera without any question. You know, with CG sometimes there's this subconscious disconnect. The way that Edward breaks down is we have one person operating his eyes and his brows and the area around his eyes. One person operating all of his mouth movement, his jaw opening and closing, the jaw that moves, you know, it's multi-axial jaw, and all the lip movement, including a tongue inside the mouth. That's the second person. And then there's one person each on each of his hands to operate the animatronic hands. And that's how the workload breaks down. We wanted to make him a little bigger if possible, but in the end, I think that where we ended up is about as big as you can get without it becoming completely unwieldy and unusable. So it's right now at the point where it is effective as a performer inside the suit, and it's not too big that you're sort of disconnected from it. You know, we still have to feel a connection in the physical world, and that was the whole conceit from the beginning. It's very difficult. You have to be in tremendous condition, a great athlete, to be able to negotiate just wearing the suit, let alone performing, you know, and having a performance come through all of those layers of material that are in front of you to convey, you know, subtle emotions, you know, and to convey any number of things that the director's asking him to do. With Tommy coming to my studio and the two of us sitting down and talking about what Muriel was going to look like, we created a look, you know, a sort of an idea that she would have cracks in her face and she would be, you know, pale, ashen, you know, and just a really sort of almost the statue that came to life kind of, you know, look. Initially, nobody likes the process. I mean, you're having rubber glued to your face and, you know, paint put around your eyes, and it's not happy time, you know. But what I've always noticed is that after that first application, you know, before the actor comes out of the chair, as they're standing up to look at themselves in the mirror, there's a change, and you see it. It's immediate. And when they see themselves as the character completely, all of a sudden they forget about the sensory stuff that's going on, and they look at this entity that's staring back at them from the mirror, who's not them, but it is them. It's a pretty cool moment.
Tommy constantly has reference points. He's actually quite versed. It's funny, he knows film better than most people who make them, you know, in the States and so on. He really knows American cinema better than anybody. And he always has an example, and it's refreshing. You know, it's tough because he has an example, and then he goes, "But I don't really want to do it that way. That's copying." But you know, the tone and the style of how that happened was really cool. And if we could, so no, he comes up with a lot of wishes that, but he backs them up with, you know, tone and spirit. Stephen Scott, our production designer, is just wonderful and great to work with and very talented. So we made a deal up front. It's another example of just getting together and say, how are we going to solve this? So Stephen, as the production designer, is art directing and designing all our set extensions for us. So if we have a 1,000-foot rock cliff and he's building just this, he doesn't just give us just this. He may build just this on the set, but he gives us plans and details and drawings for everything. So he's designing for our visual effects. He's designing for our model builders and our animators. And production designers are actually really good at this. You know, Stephen Scott is actually very good at this, and he loves it, and it's fun. Visceral and messy and painful. I think that's, you know, that's really it. That is the tone of the movie, you know, and the performance and Tommy's, you know, in his script, they have the sense of humor in there. We don't need to add that to the visuals. The sense of humor will live through that. So I think if we really go for just, you know, harsh visceral impact, the sense of humor will come through and counterpoint that, I think, really well. But painful. It's gotta hurt. I mean, they kill witches. You can't cheat as much with 3D. You know how in stunts, somebody throws a punch, your camera, and they throw the punch and they miss like that? That works with one camera. You do that in 3D, you clearly missed. It's hard to stack up the lens because you know that fist was here. A lot of the classic film tricks don't work, and you have to rethink them. So it's really, it's really, really a difficult thing. I think style-wise, it's very, very different how you shoot. Not only with a 3D rig that, you know, we're using these, they're big. You know, you've got big cameras, and it looks like you have a Volkswagen on top of an Airy head. It's massive, and so you can imagine how fast you're swinging that thing around in action. Having said that, when you're shooting action, you better not be swinging the 3D camera around with 2-3 second cuts, because your eye can't adjust to that. Your eye needs, like, what is it, 2-3 seconds to even settle on that. The script and the story and all of us are demanding so much of Edward, possibly even more than any person in a suit could do. However, we're doing a lot with that. But we did, that was something that there was a lot of thought, and there was a lot of second thought and trying to figure out how to deal with that, you know, emotion, and, you know, it's rubber, you know, and not a lot of us have had a lot of success with you know, things moving, and, you know, need to go in and fix. So I think rather than look at it as this or this, visual effects or makeup effects, or, you know, animatronics or anything like that, we went into it as, okay, we're going to find where that center is. In most wand effects, or just the concept of an effects animation in general, you always have to fight it looking cool or beautiful. It just always goes that way. Even when you try to get nasty, even with fire or, you know, anything like that, it just always looks, wow, that's great looking. And we don't want that. We need something that's just hideous. So the wand effect that comes out that shouldn't be big and over the top and lighting up the room. It should be subtle, but it should also hurt, and it should be hideous and have a nasty quality to it. And that's what we're trying for.